So God made the firmament and separated the water under the firmament from the water above it. And it was so. Genesis 1-7. So God made the firmament. He separated the water below from the water above. And it was so. No thunder shook the heavens. No flashes of lightning marked the moment. No great wind or tremor announced the shift. It simply happened quietly, purposefully, completely. There was no struggle, no chaos, no resistance. Just the voice of the Creator, followed by gentle order. No shouting, no panic, no force, only obedience, divine alignment. God spoke, He acted, and the universe responded. There is something deeply sacred in the stillness of that moment. In the world that glorifies noise, hustle, and high drama, we forget the power of quiet obedience. We expect transformation to be loud and visible. We think healing must come through some grand breakthrough, some earth-shaking encounter. But the firmament was formed in silence. Separation happened without spectacle. Creation continued with calm. This verse teaches us something subtle, but life-changing. The greatest shifts in your life don't always come with fanfare. Sometimes, the most powerful change is the quietest one. The decision no one sees. The prayer, whispered in the dark. The boundaries set without explanation. The moment you choose alignment over approval. It doesn't look like much to the outside world, but in the spiritual realm, the heavens are responding. God didn't need to prove Himself with volume. He didn't argue with the waters. He didn't wrestle them into place. He simply spoke, and they moved. And maybe that's what we need more of in our own lives. Not striving, but surrender. Not chaos, but clarity. Not shouting, but stillness. There's a kind of peace that comes from knowing who you are and what you're called to do. A calm that rises when your heart is in tune with God's rhythm. It's not the absence of challenge, it's the presence of confidence. When you walk in divine alignment, you don't need to convince anyone. You don't need the world's applause or understanding. You just need to know that your steps match His voice, and sometimes that looks like making a quiet change, like separating from something that no longer fits your season, like saying yes to less noise, less pressure, less pretending, so you can say yes to more of what matters. More peace, more truth, more purpose. So God made the firmament. He didn't overthink it. He didn't delay. He didn't say. He acted, and it was so. Imagine the simplicity of that. A word, an action, and then ... Stillness, resolution, completion. That's the power of aligned obedience. Not rushed, not forced, just true. And that's available to you too. You don't need the storm to prove your breakthrough. You don't need the noise to prove you're changing. Let your quiet decision be your declaration. Let your calm choice be your courage. You're not less powerful because you're not loud. In fact, your quiet may hold more power than you know. Because when God speaks and you respond, the universe shifts. Not always with a bang, but always with purpose. Always with peace, and it is so. How often do we hesitate to act? How many moments have passed where we knew what needed to be done, felt it deep in our hearts, but still paused? How often do we hesitate to act? We overthink, we fear, we delay. We wait for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect confidence, and in the waiting, we begin to wonder if we're even meant to move at all. We stall, not because we don't care, but because we're overwhelmed by what might go wrong. We rehearse every possible failure, every imagined judgment, every what if that could hold us back. And so, We remain stuck, not because of lack of desire, but because of lack of follow-through. But Genesis 1:7 shows us something different, something simple and profound. God spoke and then he acted. There was no pause between the intention and the movement. No retreat. He didn't wait for more clarity. He didn't need more confirmation. Once the word was spoken, the action followed. And because he moved, it was so. There's something sacred in that follow-through, in the trust it takes to act when nothing around you has changed yet, in the courage it takes to obey the direction, even if the path ahead is still being formed. Transformation didn't wait for everything to be in place. It didn't wait for more signs. It happened the moment obedience took shape. Creation happened not just because of God's voice, but because of his willingness to follow his own word with action. And that's a message we need more than ever. Because the gap between knowing and doing is often where our dreams get lost. We know we should forgive, but we hesitate. We know we need to leave that toxic habit, but we wait. We know we're meant for something more, but fear tells us we're not ready. So we plan and plan and plan. But planning is not the same as creating. Reflection is not the same as movement. God didn't just speak the firmament into being. He made it, so God made the firmament. That verse holds more power than we give it credit for. It tells us that execution matters, that faith without action is unfinished, that obedience must go beyond belief. It must become a step, a change, a moment when what's inside finally moves outward. Creation is not a passive process. It is participation. It is alignment with divine rhythm. It is allowing the word to not only fill your heart but move your hands. God's example here is not distant or unreachable. It is close. It is human. It is a reminder that being made in his image means we are called to move too, even when it's quiet, even when it's uncomfortable, even when we're not sure where it's going. The breakthrough didn't wait. The transformation didn't stall. It happened because God didn't hesitate. He spoke and he moved. And that movement changed everything. What if your next breakthrough isn't waiting for more motivation, but for movement? What if the shift you've been praying for is waiting for you to act on what you already know, to make the call, to say the prayer, to release what's been holding you back, to start even if you're not sure how it will end? There's a peace that comes when you move in alignment with what you know is right, a clarity that only arrives once your feet start walking. Sometimes we wait for the path to be fully lit before we take the first step, but that's not how divine creation works. The light comes when we move. The way opens as we walk. Genesis reminds us that creation isn't just about speaking things into existence. It's about following through, about doing the work, even if no one sees it, about building the firmament, whatever that looks like in your life, with intention and quiet confidence. It may not feel spectacular. It may not feel dramatic, but your movement matters. Your obedience is part of your becoming. So ask yourself, gently, what have I been hesitating to do? What word have I heard? What truth do I know that I have yet to act on? Don't wait for perfect peace. Don't wait for the fear to disappear. Move with the fear. Move with the uncertainty. Move with the knowing that even the smallest step in the right direction carries the power of divine creation behind it. Because when you move in alignment with God's word, it is so taught. Sometimes you already know what to do. The truth has already been whispered into your soul. The insight has come, clear and sharp. You've prayed, you've listened, and deep down, you've heard the direction. There's no mystery anymore. There's no more need for signs or confirmations. You know, you've received clarity, not all the answers, but enough to take a step, enough to begin, but still, you're standing at the edge, frozen, watching your breakthrough from a distance, hoping things will get easier, praying for the fear to disappear, waiting for someone to walk with you, to validate the step, to remove the risk. But this verse from Genesis shows us something stronger, something unshakable. It says God didn't wait, He didn't hesitate, He moved, He acted, and it was so. That's the rhythm of real creation. Not just the speaking, but the doing. Not just the inspiration, but the action. The world wasn't formed through intention alone. It was built through movement, through obedience, through follow-through. How often do we sit with dreams burning in our hearts, yet never step toward them? How often do we ask God to speak when He's already spoken, and what we need now isn't more revelation, but more courage? We say we're waiting on God, but sometimes God is waiting on us, waiting for us to trust the word we've already received, waiting for us to stop circling the same mountain of fear, waiting for us to do the very thing He planted in our hearts when no one else was looking. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need the full plan. You just need to begin, even if your voice shakes, even if your legs tremble, even if it makes no sense to the people around you, because divine obedience doesn't always look logical. It looks faithful. And here's the beautiful thing. When you move in alignment with God's voice, the universe bends to respond. The same God who formed the skies responds to faith in action. He didn't create the firmament with debate or drama. He simply said it. Then He did it, and it was so. That is the kind of clarity we're called to walk in. Not just clarity of mind, but clarity of purpose. A resolve that says, I know enough to move, and I trust enough to act. This is not about striving. It's not about proving anything. It's not about chasing perfection. It's about trusting the instruction that's already in your hands. It's about believing that what God placed in your heart was never meant to sit dormant. It was meant to live, to breathe, to take form. Don't just speak it, do it. Don't just dream, act. Don't just hope, obey what's been placed in your heart. Because obedience is what turns vision into reality. It's the bridge between faith and fulfillment. It's the moment when heaven meets earth through your yes and no. It won't always feel easy. There will be fear, there will be resistance, but those things don't disqualify you. They just remind you that you're stepping into something bigger than comfort, bigger than ego, bigger than your past. And sometimes the very act of movement is what shakes fear loose. Sometimes boldness doesn't come before the step, it comes because of the step. So what's your step? What's the thing you already know you need to do but haven't done yet? What's the call that keeps echoing in your soul, waiting for your yes? Don't silence it any longer. Don't wait for someone else to believe in you. Don't let fear write your story. Move, act, trust. Because when you walk in what's already been spoken to your heart, heaven echoes your steps, and it will be so. You are one step away from alignment, one decision, one moment of courage, one act of obedience. That doesn't require full understanding, only trust. That's how close you are. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to see the whole picture. You just need to take the next faithful step. Sometimes we convince ourselves that transformation is far away, hidden behind layers of time, effort, and impossible leaps. But what if it's not? What if it's right in front of you, quietly waiting for your yes? What if the shift isn't delayed by divine will, but by hesitation? Not because you're weak, not because you're unworthy, but simply because you've forgotten the power of movement. You are not as far as you think. Alignment doesn't require perfection, it requires direction. God doesn't ask you to fix the world, just to respond to His voice. And that voice is calling you, not into chaos, but into order. Not into exhaustion, but into creation, into peace, into clarity, into freedom. You don't need to control the whole outcome. That's not your job. The outcome belongs to God. Your job is the next step, the next word, the next act of faith. So speak it. Even if your voice shakes, speak life over the place that's been dry. Speak light into the place that's been dark. Speak peace into the place that's been restless. Build it. Build the dream you've carried in silence. Build the habits that align with who you truly are. Build the boundaries that protect your soul. Build the identity that reflects heaven, not fear. Even if it's brick by brick, even if no one notices yet, build. Separate what must be separated. Not with anger, but with wisdom. Let go of the voices that confuse you, the distractions that drain you, the patterns that keep you stuck in old versions of yourself. God separated the waters not to divide in anger, but to make room for creation. Sometimes, sacred growth begins with sacred separation. Create what must be created. Write what's been inside your heart. Start what you keep postponing. Forgive, release, heal. Make space for the new thing that's trying to be born through. You don't wait for perfect conditions, just start. Because when you act in alignment with heaven, heaven meets you in motion. And like the waters obeyed, your life will begin to respond. That's the power of alignment. That's the force of obedience. When your soul moves in rhythm with divine instruction, everything around you begins to shift. People move, doors open, peace returns. The atmosphere changes, not always loudly, but deeply, because creation isn't just a story in the past. It's a pattern for the present. When God said, "Let there be," the world didn't argue, it adjusted. And when you say yes to the next right thing, the same thing happens. Your world begins to rearrange itself to reflect the order and beauty that obedience brings. This is the truth. When you move in alignment with heaven, the earth has no choice but to rearrange itself. The firmament wasn't formed through striving, but through clarity, through a single decision to follow through. So make your move, not because you're fearless, but because you're ready, because you trust the one who's been guiding you. All along, one step, one moment, one quiet, brave act of obedience, and it will be so. So don't let fear hold your action hostage. Don't let overthinking chain you to the same place. Don't let the unknown talk you out of the step that could change everything. Fear is loud. It always has something to say. It convinces you to wait just a little longer, to gather just a little more proof, to be just a little more ready. But sometimes, waiting becomes a hiding place. And fear, dressed up as wisdom, convinces you to stay where you are, safe, but stuck. What you need is not more information. You don't need another sign, another confirmation, another green light from the world. You already know, deep down. Beneath the noise, beneath the hesitation, you know what needs to be done. You know the step, the one your heart keeps returning to, the one that brings both peace and discomfort at the same time, not because it's wrong, but because it's right, because it asks something of you, because it calls you forward, and forward always feels risky. But what you need now is not more answers, you need courage. The kind of courage that whispers, "Do it afraid." The kind of courage that doesn't wait to feel brave, but chooses to be brave anyway. The courage to act on what you already know, not later, not eventually. Now, courage to trust the voice that spoke light into your soul. That voice that first gave you the vision, that stirred your spirit when no one else saw, that met you in the quiet and planted something holy within you. That voice isn't fading, it's waiting. Waiting for you to believe that it was real, that it still matters, that it wasn't just a feeling, but a divine invitation. Courage to take that next step, even when it feels quiet. Because most of the time, breakthrough doesn't begin with a shout. It begins with a whisper. It begins with ordinary moments, quiet choices, simple obedience. It begins with you deciding to do the next right thing, even if no one claps, even if no one sees, even if everything in you wants to turn back. Because when you align your action with God's purpose, something changes. You step out of striving and into surrender. You stop trying to force outcomes and begin to flow with divine timing. You stop carrying the pressure to make it all work, and instead trust that God has already gone ahead of you. And in that space, that holy intersection between your obedience and His purpose, everything begins to move. The atmosphere responds. The road unfolds. Clarity comes. Peace rises. Not always instantly, not always dramatically, but steadily, quietly, powerfully. When you trust the process and move forward, the shift happens not just around you, but within you. Your heart expands, your spirit lifts, your mind clears. Because now, you're no longer carrying the weight of indecision. You're no longer stuck in the ache of almost ooze. You've crossed into motion. And that's where transformation lives, in motion. So don't let fear win. Don't let silence scare you. Don't let the unknown paralyze your purpose. Move, speak, build, trust. Because when you take the step in faith, when you say yes to what God has placed inside you, it won't just be possible, it will be so.